I mean, how do I describe it? It's
bold,
A light,
black,
unapologetically black,
very funny, amusing,
caring,
You give great advice from a different perspective. Passionate,
free.
vulnerable,
a creative,
sexy.
My girl is lit as fuck.
Always ready to twerk a little something.
genuine, very genuine,
resilient.
like sixth sense, otherworldly. If you know, you know.
it's so vibrant, baby. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Soul Vibrant, the place where music, history, and culture collide. I am your host, Lady AC. So, just going straight into it. Today's episode is actually inspired by some events. I realized I did something I was not supposed to do. I unfortunately started to compare myself to other things that were already out here. Because, it gets to the point now, everybody and their grandma got a podcast now, and I felt like, I don't know if you guys ever heard that term, but the market's saturated, as people tend to say. But now we realize that's just a language that people use to discourage people from doing things, or that capitalism uses to keep people in line so they can fall in line with what capitalism needs them to do instead of actually following what is in them to do. But that's a whole nother conversation. But it kind of still ties in with this. But regardless, I was comparing myself to all these other podcasts out here because I was just seeing, people having thousands to even millions of followers, posting content every day and pictures and stuff like that. But when I listen to their content, or when you see a lot of these things that are floating around, it really is nothing. They really just sitting on it really sounds like some 2 people, 3 people sometimes, or maybe even if it's just one person, just found a mic and just started talking. Or they just started playing anything. And it got to the point where instead of trying to compare myself to that, I was like, I knew when I wanted to get on this mic, whether it was in the studio, whether it was on the podcast, not only did I have something to say, but I wanted everything that I say have meaning. I wanted to use my voice to literally not only just share my perspective, but to literally share information and share knowledge and share culture and share music and history that actually gave you something new, that gave you something not only just to think about, but something that's also entertaining, but also that ultimately enriches you and progress where you are at this moment into that next moment that you need to be. In that inspired today's episode, titled Talking Shit with a Purpose. Because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk my shit. But I'm going to give it to you in a way that not only that you understand it, but not only way that you entertain it, but something that's actually useful. Not just clickbait, not just regurgitating the same arguments and the same discussion. Because if we look at the world that we're in right now, we have enough of that. And especially with recent events, is with a lot of people concerned about this election and the direction of the world and the direction of the country and these different genocides going on, all this stuff that's going on. We need something meaningful. We need things that progress us and give us joy. We need things that give us the ability to think and actually understand that we have the power to change all these things. And ultimately to give that power back to us so we can create a world that's different. So we're going to take our first musical break and then we'll dive right back on in. All right? All right.
I find it interesting that the people that don't know what they're doing seem to always want to be in control. My thing is, if you're going to be in this driver's seat, I need you to drive like you got some sense. However, Don't think just because you know your way around the city that you know my address, all right? It would beseech you to ask somebody.
When you don't make up your mind, if you like, you can take control. Don't keep me in neutral. Keep it cute and unethical all night. Since you in my peripheral, combining our chemicals, floating like we on edibles. On edibles. Do you see the writings on the wall? Get involved whenever you want, 'cause I feel it in my body. There's no ignoring heat. Don't nothing shock me but your electricity. When you don't make up your mind, if you like, you can take control. Don't keep me in neutral. Keep it cute and unethical all night. Since you in my peripheral, combining our chemicals, floating like we on edibles. On edibles. On edibles.
And that was Durand Bernarr with Neutral. And I picked that song because the very opening of that song is so powerful. One, it is classic Ideal Durand, who has been killing it this year, by the way. But I'm loving it. But I love that opening where he talks about how it's always people who have no control, always wanting to be in control. That exactly encapsulates what I'm talking about. People just getting online or just getting on platforms or having these massive platforms and just, it's so obvious they don't know what they're doing, but they want to be in control so bad, or in control of others so bad, that they're willing to lead them astray just to have that control. And that fully explains the current events that we are going through right now, that we've experienced within these last 2 months. The election that has everyone, I don't want to say up in arms, but I would say definitely in this space of worry, in this space of uncertainty, in this space of, honest, to me, contradiction. And I feel that that was based off of the way we tried to process the results and the way we reacted to it. Meaning, we didn't allow ourselves to feel those emotions collectively as a society, as a country. We didn't allow ourselves to really process how we felt what happened, what those emotions are, how they show up, how they act. And I think in response of doing that, a lot of people had a knee-jerk reaction. As they say, that as soon as they felt it, they felt a need to react. They felt the need to say something. They felt a need to act on the very first emotion that they felt. Now, granted, I give grace because, everybody reacts to things differently. Emotions hit people, differently. That is understandable. But when it becomes an issue is where you take that emotion that you haven't fully processed and then say something damaging or act on it and create even more of a contradiction and more chaos that's already experienced. So when the election results happened and the exit polls were shown and the statistics were given and who voted where and what voted where, the very first thing that happened, honestly, we're being honest, which always happens in elections, is that it becomes a blame game. Who didn't do this? Who didn't do this work? What folks did this? What did that? But the irony of that blame is it always ends up targeting the marginalized communities first. It never places the blame on what the actual problem is, which is white supremacy, patriarchy, trying to stay in control, have all and be all, and take everything from everybody else and leave the rest of us with nothing. It does its job, and it makes us blame and fight each other. And that's exactly what we started to see from, especially online, especially in social media. A lot of people were targeting, the Hispanic voters and the indigenous voters who already, especially when it came to indigenous voters, who are already basically annexed out of the process of voting, who are on every single end, from the process of voting to the registration of voting to even just trying to get to the polls themselves, are blocked at every single avenue. So for instance, like when Georgia, when it came up with all the voter suppression that happened, they've been going through that for generations. And yet when the exit polls came out and it showed their representation, it put them on the map of supporting or being the ones to blame. Or that's why people took it. They were being the ones to blame, not realizing that how hard voter suppression has hit them. How even to the point that their votes, they have to basically be forced to vote a certain way just for their votes to be counted. And none of that is right. None of that should happen. But unfortunately for that system, at its job, doing its job, that's how it played out. But instead of taking the time to learn that and process that and get to their point, people were so quick to be like, how could you vote against your own interests? How could you, oh, y'all are the reason we did this and that happened. What we don't realize in doing that blame game is that we become the very same people that we claim that we were trying to fight and overcome. Another example, so for instance, with the Hispanic voter vote, one of the policies that this new administration that's finna take over wanted to do was mass deportation. And they meant everybody, not just undocumented. They talking about even documented, even U.S. citizens are up for deportation. And while yes, the Hispanic vote was there and they gained it and they voted against their own interests, and that does impact them, that does not give us a right who voted against that to act the same way that the people who want to mass deport them in the same way. Because what I saw on social media was there were people actually cheering and saying and joking about sharing the ICE number. And for anybody who doesn't know what ICE is the immigration police, basically the immigration police who crack down on so-called illegal immigrants. And the reason I say so-called is because there's no such thing as an illegal person on stolen land. If you know, you know. Shout out to our indigenous people who were here first. But that's a whole nother conversation. But however, my point was there were people joking about sharing it or being the first person to call that number or quick to add to that. And I'm like, what part of that? For one, what part of that is funny? Two, what part of that is progressive or shows that you tried to work and change this world or really do that? Like my thing is, you wasn't really trying to create change. You wanted to make things better from you. And that's honestly what the other side is trying to do. They're trying to be in control of what they want and get rid of and take advantage of everything else. So why would we want to mimic that? Why would we want to emulate that behavior? Like they say, you can't fight fire with fire. That's what that means. You can't become the very thing that you're trying to be against. And that's what we saw happen. And that's because we were having these knee-jerk reactions versus actually processing how we feel and taking that time to step back. Because what also happens when we don't allow ourselves to do that, it allows misinformation and what I like to call misinformed intelligence Because I don't want to really call it ignorance, because ignorance simply means that you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing, because there's always something else new to learn. We all have an opportunity to learn more than what we have now. However, the problem is when you take that ignorance and you choose to run with it because you're more comfortable with what you already know. And that allows for misinformation to seep through and propaganda to seep through, and it creates this misinformed intelligence that I talk about. So for me, misinformed intelligence is basically what happens when taking advice or information from people who are completely one-sided and biased and running with it and informing others and throwing it onto other people and projecting it onto other people as if it's fact and law to live by and act. I don't know if you guys remember, but back in I want to say this had to be around the pandemic time, at least the end of 2020 or 2021, there was this discourse that was going on in line, or this conversation going online about the college degree not meaning anything. And that's very ironic when, for instance, statistics were coming out that, that black people, especially black women, were the most educated demographic, and how all these people were going back to school, and all these people were at least getting a master's degree, or how a master's degree was becoming more popular. So it's very interesting how that conversation was happening at the same time. And something to be said, because there was a critique that I do agree with, is that what we were finding ourselves is that with the job market is that a lot of people were not recognizing, a lot of jobs at the time were not recognizing bachelor degrees or college degrees as sufficiently as they should have. And so a lot of people were struggling trying to find employment due to that. And but once again, that wasn't the degree's fault or you getting that degree. It was capitalism's fault, because capitalism kept changing the goalpost because so many people were getting access. And the thing about capitalism is, in order for some people to succeed, somebody has to be on the bottom. And if everybody has an equal playing field to have access to better, then capitalism can't run. It can't exist. The way they do it is by having these kind of conversations online to discourage people from pursuing it. And so taking advantage of a vulnerable situation, such as a justified conversation, but also that, not everybody is meant to go to college. Tech schools and trade schools, people go into those systems and also needing to be accepted and kind of deemed as viable directions of ways of gaining information or progressing oneself academically. That is legit. But what happened is that was taken and it became a conversation of, well, the degree just doesn't matter. The degree isn't you can be successful alone with just this. Me personally, that whole discourse created what we're seeing now. What we're seeing, a lot of people literally going online or going toe to toe or getting into unqualified positions, arguing with people who are truly qualified, who studied, who understand context, who know how to read between the lines, who understand how to tell the difference between scholarly source and misinformation or propaganda, who know how to read, not only understand the context and understand the author's reasoning and understand the narrative that they're trying to create, but also understand the tone and also understand the purpose behind the writing and the information that they showed. And see, that's information that you do learn with a college degree. That's information you do learn as you advance academically and grow. Or you have more access to information that helps you learn how to do that. Or programs that help you learn how to do that. So imagine if everybody had that access, if everybody had that grasp of knowledge, this system would not be able to function and cater to, and this world would not be in this position that it was, because there will be too many people thinking critically to try to progress and take this information forward. And they can't have that. Capitalism can't have that. White supremacy can't have that. Patriarchy cannot have that. So what do? They spread out this misinformation. They spread out this propaganda to make you think that it's not worth it. Because I'm going to tell you one thing. And I said this even back then. I'm like, there is nothing you can tell me to make me regret the education I got. There is nothing you can say, do to make me think my degree isn't worth it. Let me tell you about that piece of paper. That piece of paper is titanium. Shoot, that is vibranium over here, okay? They do everything in their power to limit access. And one of those things that become more useful is they use the people around us. They use the people that we do have access to. And that only runs more rampant with the internet. The internet makes people so bold in thinking they're so connected and that they're able to have such access that they take this and go. I'll explain that further. When you accept this misinformed intelligence and use that to take away the humanity of other people, or try to prove that you're the leader, that you're the smart one, that you know what you're talking about, that you're in control, you continue to make this system successful. I never understood why we think that the best position for us to be is to be the oppressor ourselves. That is not liberation. That's not equality. That's not going to lead us anywhere. Because now you're the one on top, but you're crushing other people. You're taking away from other people. The reason I give grace in that is because people are literally using what they know, or what all they understand, to try to create change. We have to be willing to push ourselves to be able to truly question what we're being told, what we're being heard, what we're being fed, even by the very same people that are feeding this information, even if those people look like us. When we say all skin folk ain't kin folk, that's what we're talking about. Because some of those same people are promoting capitalism, are promoting white supremacy, but just in blackface, literally. And how do we overcome that? How do we get past that? Well, for one, the issue with that is, how we get to that point is that there are so many people trying, and I'm just going to stay in the black lane because that's the only lane I can fully explain. Living in the black experience, being part of the black experience, being part of black culture, I'm going to stay in that lane because I know to stay in my lane. For one, I know to stay in my lane. We are trying to talk about topics or information that either we don't have all the context to, and we're out here trying to advise everybody else. It's okay to not know, and it's okay to say up front, like, hey, I just learned this. I don't have that much information about it, but, so I'm going to stick to this. There's nothing wrong with saying that, but there are too many people who want to come off as they know everything, or that they learned all the good stuff, so they got what it takes, and they got to prove themselves. And you know where that attitude comes from? It comes from capitalism. And that's how, things like gatekeeping happen and people holding each other back. And that's where that comes from. An example of this, everybody talks about Martin Luther King. Everybody talks about Malcolm X. We recently acknowledged the passing of Fred Hampton. So everybody wants to be Fred Hampton. Everybody wants to be Kareem Toure. Everybody wants to be the Black Panther. Everybody wants to be, Shirley Chisholm or Fannie Lou Hamer or Ella Baker or all these great noble people. James Baldwin. Everybody wants to be there and be prolific in those lanes. I remember seeing a post from Bernice King, Martin Luther King's youngest daughter, and she said, one day out of the year, everybody wants to emulate or copy my dad's message. But for 364 days of the year, they don't live by it. When we look back at those individuals that I mentioned, their goal was not to be these big names. Their goals were not to be these great leaders. They just became that because they were authentic and stayed in their lane of what they knew, who they were, and the information they had and what they had to offer the world. They grew into these people. They had to go through things. They had to process things. They had to learn things and unlearn things and grow and change. The problem is a lot of the parts of their stories are left out, especially with Martin Luther King. His story has been crafted so well by capitalism and white supremacy to the point where supremacists and racists use his message. They're still trying to promote their agendas. There was this switch of, oh, let's all be together. We all, we don't let this election ruin families. Like, we still can be friends. Don't let it ruin friendships. Like, what? No, keep the same energy. We have to really understand and raise our consciousness to understand what is being told and who is telling us this in the first place. Because going back to the college discourse that I was talking about, the people who were spearheading this message were European American males who have privileged and have went to the most prestigious colleges, have trust funds, have all this stuff. Of course, a college degree doesn't matter to them. They're already set up. But they're telling poorer European Americans and marginalized communities this information. And so people in these communities are feeding off of it because they're trying to make sense. They didn't take time to process this system, but their knee-jerk reaction to what's going on around them, like, oh, it has to be this, possibly. It has to be what they're feeding me. This is the only thing that makes sense. Another thing that happened was the whole discourse around banned books. Literally after the election, European American females were going online, basically creating discourse saying, stop making books so political. Stop bringing politics into everything. Stop bringing race into everything. Books are for entertaining. They're for, leisure or their hobbies. And shout out to all the black creator, Black Book Talk, the black version of TikTok for book lovers, who constantly shouted them out and corrected them. Looking back at this history, when have books not been political? When have books not talked about what is going on around us? And what's interesting about these European female Americans is, as they're saying this, they're literally standing in front of their bookshelves, or they're sitting in front of their bookshelves, and you look at the books they have on that shelf, and they got The Maid's Tale, they got Divergent, they have Harry Potter, they have all these books with heavy political messages, or overcoming an oppressive system, or overcoming a dictator or oppressive force who wants to rise up and rule in evil. And you sit there talking about, stop making these books political. Huh? Karen, you alright? Karen, come on now. Becky, what you doing? Books have always been political. It was illegal for marginalized, especially black people, to read and write. Why do you think that was? Because they knew if we gained access and rose our consciousness and actually processed the information that was given us, we knew that this entire system that they were creating was not only faulty, but had made no sense. Once again, you say books aren't political, but there was a point where women had to pretend to be men in order to get their books and writings published, and come up with surnames that sound more masculine just so they can get their work published. Phyllis Wheatley had to go on trial and defend that the work that she wrote was written by her because they said a slave was not fit enough to write something that astounding, poetic. Books aren't political? Come on now. Books have always been political. Yes, there are some that are there for light reading and engagement, but all of them have a message. All of them create an atmosphere of knowledge that progresses us or makes us feel a certain way that betters us once we put it down. If they weren't political, we wouldn't be trying so hard to ban certain voices, to change curriculums that would not include these books or this information. At the time of this recording, we lost another legend, the amazing Nikki Giovanni. And in one of the last interviews she ever did, she wore this shirt that said, "I write banned books." When you look at the writing and the legacy and the information that Nikki Giovanni left, there was always a message of not only empowerment, but of, I'm gonna talk my shit because I know my shit. And can't no one tell me otherwise. Especially about my experience of being black, especially about my experience of being a woman, especially about the experience of the community I live in. You can't tell me nothing. And that's how she went through life. We have to stay in our lane. Find what we know best, and usually what we know best is ourselves.
Even if I run away, even if I fall in on my face, you will prepare a place for me, waiting on my full return to thee. Kiss away my brokenness, cure me from this hopeless heart I've known. You are the lover of my soul. I'm coming home. Your love is meeting me where I need it most. I don't need to hide. Truth for the keeping, your word you mean it. My God, you've never lied. Even if I run away, even if I fall in on my face, you will prepare a place for me, waiting on my full return to thee. Your love is meeting me where I need it most. I don't need to hide. Ain't gotta hide, ain't gotta hide, huh? Truth for the keeping, your words you mean it. My God, you've never lied. You never lie, you never lie. Your love is meeting me right where I am. No need to keep my promise to myself. That might sound strong, but Lord, it's hell if I'm not living with you. You're the only thing that's true. You come the second that I make a move in your direction. Your perfection is my protection. I'm safe with you. I'm sorry for all the times that I played with you. Thought that I could be good without God. That's way extra. So now I said confessing that my successes came straight from heaven. This world is way too messy, and we the ones who messed up. But Yeshua made us new. I gotta sing, I'm blessed up with the love that is realer than I ever imagined. So I'll keep walking with the mind going back. Your love is meeting me where I need it most. I don't need to hide. Ain't gotta hide, ain't gotta hide. Truth for the keeping, your word you mean it. My God, you never lie. My only purpose, life that I'm living, knowing to love you more. You are my heartbeat, lifeblood within me, home here within your arms.
And that was Madison Ryann Ward with Prodigal featuring Benji. The truth is, a lot of these people in control that I've been talking about and dealing with, a lot of these people don't really know themselves. And because they can't know themselves, they make that everybody else's problem. We have to know and study and be real with ourselves. And understand the power that is in us. So that way we don't have to go out and try to take power from any other source or any other person. Yes, we can be open to different perspectives and opinions and information, because that's how we grow and that's how we experience and that's how we learn. However, it's not to put ourselves in a better position in the world we already live in, which unfortunately I think a lot of people think that is what freedom and liberation is. But it's not. When we say liberation, we're talking about freedom from all these systems. When I look at what's going on in Syria and what's going on in South Korea right now, at the time of this broadcast, they both went through major political movements, to where I think in South Korea, they ousted out the president at the time because of the imperialism set on by the United States and foreign powers infecting in their elections and who are over the country and who created that mass disconnect with North Korea. It went through a major power shift with that, and those people are free and talking and moving in ways of collectively organizing and protesting to keep this balance. And in Syria, they just overcame their regime, and I want to say, I cannot remember the name of the prison right now, but a recent prison where they under that regime that was open was cracked open, and all those prisoners are being released. That country is finally understanding freedom and not being in that. And it's heartbreaking to see, the torture that, especially the people who lived in those prisons had to live with. Most of them haven't even committed a crime. They were literally just in that jail for years, subjected to every kind of abuse, neglect you could think of. And yet to see them free and running through the streets like, oh, this is over, this is that. It makes them see that a possibility for a better future is a reality. And I want that for us. I want that when we go into these new years, to know that, to keep this hope that we can still create a world that's worth living in. We can still create a world that's worth having our children in, and having an educational system that will actually help us thrive and progress, where everybody can achieve their dreams, or at least work to where they can actually make a decent living for themselves, so they won't have to worry about their basic necessities or health care, to where they don't have to take extreme measures into their own hands just to feel like somebody cares, or to take out the people who don't care. Is necessary because you done left people in such a desperate situations. What else will they do to get you to listen? So we need to start listening. We need to really start learning and really asking ourselves, who is telling us these messages? What's the reason for telling us these messages? And to understand that we need to start listening and learning ourselves, and what we need, and what the people around us need, and what this world needs. So on that note, y'all, that is the end of the show. If you would like to connect with me, or just say hey, on Facebook.com, it is Queen Lady AC. On Instagram, it is _ I am Lady AC. And Twitter and TikTok is I am Lady AC as well, right? I will see you next week.